That is why Jesus is our anti-fascist king.
Okay, I don't even know what's going on. There's some things I must be missing.
Welcome to the Inner Christianity podcast, where we engage ideas, movements, and worldviews from a biblically Christian standpoint. Today, we have a different but very fun episode. Today, we'll be looking at Tick-Tock theology. So let's dig into this. Are you guys ready?
Yeah, I'm good. I had fun one night choosing these videos among many. So hopefully y'all enjoy them.
Yes. Okay, so here is the first one. Isaac, can you explain who this guy is?
Yeah, so I'll introduce each of our videos. This is Abraham Piper. So he is John Piper's son. Those of you who don't know who John Piper is a very famous evangelical pastor. So Abraham Piper has a very interesting story. He, obviously grew up Christian under John Piper, but then he was excommunicated from the church. And his dad was okay with this because he apostatized when he was like 19 years old, maybe. He was a young man when he did that. But then he came back to the church, he repented, and seemed like he had been restored to the church. But then over the last, I think, 2-3 years, he kind of publicly, through Tick-Tock, came out as a non-Christian again. He's putting out videos where he says a bunch of random stuff, but he also criticizes his upbringing, also Christianity. He doesn't mention his dad by name, but he does criticize, the faith that he grew up with. So he's a very interesting guy. So we're going to watch one of the clips from him.
Do you know how boring and soul-sucking it is to base your whole life on making sure other people change to become more like you? No, thank you. Everything's a game. Take things seriously, sure, but you get to pick what. You decide what matters. Lighten up, get laid, go bowling. That the Bible says it's best to not have kids. There are Christian sects, from Catholic to Quiverful, that believe the opposite and pump out the product like they're on a mission from God, which they think they are. I once heard a pastor say the best way to get more souls into the kingdom of heaven isn't converting people, it's making them. But listen to this delightful piece of existential dread from Ecclesiastes. I declared that the dead who had already died are happier than the living who are still alive. Relatable, but better than both is the one who has never existed. That's the Bible that says that. Of the 3 states of being that are available to potential humans, God apparently thinks that their current state is the ideal one, non-existence. It's only gonna take 2 holy seconds for someone to come along and say I'm taking this out of context, but you know what? It's pretty clear, assuming you're supposed to take the Bible literally. It's completely cool, obviously, to disagree with Ecclesiastes, just like you can disagree with the rest of the arbitrary writings that amalgamated into the Bible. But if you're gonna say that it's God's literal words, well, they just told you it's stupid to have babies.
All right, that was a little long, but what are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, so I think when you talk quick and you use big words and then you move quickly and you try to be confident, it sounds like you know what you're talking about. But nobody does something 100% one way. So he's saying you got to take everything literally, right? Well, it's kind of difficult because language can be dynamic. So contextually, he's looking at words and their definition, but not necessarily how the words are conveying meaning as like a sentence. So if you're just looking at words, don't have babies, okay, sure. But that's not what Ecclesiastes is saying. So at the end of the day, the author of Ecclesiastes is saying, even if things were to be meaningless, it is still better to choose God than not God. So you can say he's isolating the text, doing some eisegesis, proof texting, if you will, and kind of trying to prove what he's saying. But I mean, it wasn't like he really said anything that tight or tough, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know. Not really impressed.
Yeah, I think it doesn't take into account the literary style of Ecclesiastes, or even in general, like he's saying, oh, the Bible's literal, but it just discounts that there were human authors that have certain styles of writing. And Ecclesiastes especially is like a book that has poetry in it with metaphors and similes and all these other things. So that's one. And then two, like he's taking extreme branches of Christianity, taking it out of context, like just to prove what he's saying or make these extreme people look crazy. Like, oh, like pumping out babies, like instead of converting them or whatever. Like I've kind of heard like a similar thing, which is like maybe the be fruitful and multiply with Adam and Eve, who were the first humans on earth, which they should be fruitful and multiply. But also like the idea behind it is like to raise up children in a Christian family and to disciple them and teach them the ways of God, not necessarily saying like, oh, if you have a whole bunch of babies, like they'll go to heaven. Yeah, it just like there's a lot of, I feel like it's like unfair and not charitable to like certain things, but that's kind of like my initial reaction to like what he's saying. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe John Piper spent his time teaching him Calvinism and not hermeneutics.
Yo.
Dang, he said it.
I'm sorry. I like John Piper. Okay. If you read the book of Ecclesiastes, it's a very interesting book. One of the more unique books in the Bible. It has a lot of like really existential negativity in it. And the reason is because so there's like basically two authors, many people believe. There's like an editor who put it together, and then the actual teacher, or the Hebrew term I think is Kohelet. He's the one who's writing. His sayings are kind of compiled in the majority of the book of Ecclesiastes. Church tradition holds that to be Solomon, though it doesn't necessarily have to be Solomon. But clearly, it's this dude who is at the end of his life. He's tried a bunch of things, and he's pretty bitter, and he's pretty negative, though he also still has a lot of wisdom. So he's even tried seemingly being away from God, but also being with God. And then when the book closes, when the editor kind of closes the book, he talks about how, there's really nothing better. Like the book is really kind of to show like life is basically meaningless without God. And so him cherry picking from that book to be like, oh, see, the Bible says this, like that's just like completely ignorant about the entire purpose of Ecclesiastes.
All right. The next video is from Pastor Brandon Robertson, which I've seen too. I've seen his videos like more than any other TikTok video. And so I don't know if there's anything else to add, but he's like part of the LGBTQIA2+ circle that's affirming. And is he Catholic more? I don't know. But anyway, that's kind of what this is. And he talks about Jesus being a racist. So let's watch.
There's a part of the Gospel of Mark where Jesus uses a racial slur. In Mark chapter 7, there's the account of the Syrophoenician woman, a woman who is Syrian and Greek, both of which there were strong biases against within the Jewish community. And she comes to ask Jesus to heal her daughter who's possessed by a demon. And what is Jesus' response? He says, "It's not good for me to give the children's food," meaning the children of Israel's food, "to dogs." He calls her a dog. What's amazing about this account is that the woman doesn't back down. She speaks truth to power. She confronts Jesus and says, "Well, you can think that about me, but even dogs deserve the crumbs from the table." Her boldness and bravery to speak truth to power actually changes Jesus' mind. Jesus repents of his racism and extends healing to this woman's daughter. I love this story because it's a reminder that Jesus is human. He had prejudices and bias, and when confronted with it, he was willing to do his work.
Yeah, I think one of the things that stands out is, man, there's so many things wrong with this. I think the first thing is just in general, what I've noticed with some of these videos or interpretations is that we read our own context or we read our own era into the Bible. And what I mean by that is like right now, race is such a big conversation in this generation or in this time. And the fact that he speaks into racism, into the Bible, it's like okay because there are moments of that, like, but to say that Jesus is racist causes so many problems. And it's really, I think, coming from that perspective, the postmodern perspective of racism, and putting it on Jesus to make him relatable or whatever. Like he has an agenda versus letting the passage speak for itself. And I'm sure one of you guys will speak on that. Like, I think initially, if you don't really know the passage or the context or like what Jesus is trying to do, like, yeah, it could seem that way maybe, but I think to call Jesus as racist would cause a lot of problems with like the gospel and like the core of Christianity. And so that's kind of my initial response.
I think when you look at Mark 7, where he's referencing, Christ is using kind of this analogy, right? This metaphor, not necessarily saying, oh, you woman are a dog. He's just saying, it wouldn't make sense for me to feed from the table to the animals below, right? And it's not meant to be, oh, you're an animal, I'm above you. It was more so saying that his ministry had phases or plans or stages, so to speak. So it's more likely that he was talking about, I'm here with my disciples, I'm training them. And it's not that I'm not prioritizing you, but eventually the time will come. But you also see the woman's response. It's not that, like, I think if she took it offensively, she would have been like, what you call me? Like, you call me a dog? But it was more so, hey, I see what you're saying and I understand it. Even the dogs, right? They can eat the leftovers, right? So we can still be a part of this meal, if you will. So I guess for me, it's like if Jesus was calling her a dog and he was being racist, then why would she continue in that metaphor and call herself a dog? Like that wouldn't make any sense. So it doesn't seem like he's really analyzing the situation well. And then I think if you were to look at just contextually as a whole, the cultures, the fact that Jesus is even talking to her shows the radical differences that he would versus, let's say, a Pharisee, because they wouldn't mix with people of different bloods. So if Jesus was racist, then why was he talking to her in the first place? So there's just a lot of easy things to break down his argument if you just kind of understand. So definitely a lot of ignorance. Again, not impressed. I would say one more thing. The fact that he said Jesus repented, because I don't see Jesus being able to sin. I'm just like, wow, like really not viewing Christ as the appropriate God that he's supposed to be. But anyways,
yeah, and we'll actually see this later. And we talked about this when we did our episode on progressive Christianity, where they kind of view Jesus as more of like someone who was generally in solidarity with the oppressed, though I guess in this case he was racist and he needed to learn how to be more in solidarity. And so it's a very different view of Jesus for sure.
And I think it exposes like no one's going to be perfect or good enough or justice enough to, not even Jesus, apparently. So there's that. Jesus. Good luck, guys. Okay. Let's watch to see what this is about.
All right, let's talk about Lucifer, but not this guy on TikTok who's cosplaying as this guy, who's based on this DC comic, who's based on this elusive character. That's right, Lucifer is a character. He's not really in the Bible. Why people think he's in the Bible is because this right here, Lucifer, son of the morning. Except for that wasn't supposed to be capitalized, that's a typo. Lucifer in Old Latin meant light bearer, or even Venus when it was rising in the morning. But then there's Ezekiel 28 when it says somebody fell out of God's favor and basically fell from heaven. Well, that's not talking about the devil, that's talking about the king of Tri. What really convinced people that Lucifer was real and the devil was this right here. Dante Alighieri's Inferno. In Inferno, Dante says that the devil was cast out of heaven by God, hit the ground so hard that he bore a hole through earth. That became hell. He ruled over it in the center, frozen in a lake in the ninth circle. So there you go. Lucifer was a typo and a character in the Divine Comedy.
Well, speaking of typos, he said try when it was tire. So I guess that's it's a small issue here. We won't go too much in detail, but
I've actually heard this a lot, and I think there is some truth to it, right? Like from my understanding, in terms of Lucifer, it was more of a title or a descriptor of the fallen angel. But I'm honestly not too familiar with the arguments that come from it, so I'll hand it off to you fellas.
So there's some things right in this video and some things wrong, other than him mispronouncing the city. So Lucifer is not in the Bible. That's actually not Satan's name. So he's right in Isaiah 14. The reason Lucifer ends up in the Bible is because I think old translations of the Bible didn't know how to translate that word. So they just kind of left it Lucifer. And it's actually just like morning star. So it's not really a name. So he's right. Lucifer is not Satan's name, even though it became that in popular culture. That doesn't mean Satan, the devil, is not a real entity or person. You see that plenty of places in scripture, not only in the Old Testament, like the book of Job, but also more clearly in the New Testament. And we don't just get the idea of the devil, Satan, and hell from Dante's Inferno. Okay, we get it from the Bible. So yes, in this kind of small fact that Lucifer is not Satan's name, true. That doesn't mean Satan's not real.
But okay, I think that's enough. Let's move on to the next TikTok video.
Hi, I was raised in the church. I've read Bibles multiple times. So in the original Bible that is written in Hebrew Greek, there is the Hebrew Greek word almenakoitai. It was translated wrong when translated to English. When the Bible was first translated to English, it was translated through multiple other languages, causing many mistranslations, not only those connected to homosexuality. The word almenakoitai was originally translated to homosexuality. Recently, it's been found that there was a mistranslation with that word. It actually means pedophile, someone who sleeps with little boys, or kids in general. And it actually says, man shall not lay with little boy. So everyone in the comments might want to fact check because it's just embarrassing at this point.
I agree, it's embarrassing.
We talked about this in our previous episode of Homosexuality Part 1. We did a way more extensive study on it, and I don't want to, speak against her, but I don't even know if she knows Greek or Hebrew,
I mean, she's mispronouncing the word.
Oh no.
It's arsenokotai. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, to catch up on that, Isaac, did you want to?
Yeah, I won't. Obviously, we're not going to rehash everything we said in that episode. Go check it out. But this idea that the only reason why people think the Bible speaks against homosexual relationships is because of a mistranslation is just wrong on many levels. First of all, there are other passages that talk about it. It's not just this particular word that's in 1 Corinthians 6 and 1 Timothy chapter 1. And just because it's mistranslated, and I actually agreed in that episode that I wouldn't translate that word simply as homosexual. Arsenokotai means like men bedding other men, like literally. And there's very good reasons to believe that this is what Paul was getting at, because he's taking it from Leviticus, the Greek version of the Old Testament. So that doesn't really change a whole lot if you're trying to be a Christian who's affirming of gay relationships. And, this idea too, that just because there's a mistranslation back in 1946 in the RSV, that now all other English Bibles, NIV, NASB, ESV, just took that on face value without doing their own work is silly.
Yeah, and translations in general is more complicated than I think what we think it is, just because Hebrew and Greek, they function differently from English. And so you're not going to get the 100% accurate word. So anyone who speaks two languages kind of knows that when you're translating any Korean words like nunchi. Like you don't have a good English word that embodies what nunchi means, which is like social sense or like kind of like reading the room. Like there's not really one word that can capture that. And it's like the same thing with any kind of English or like language translations and things like that. And so just to say, duh, like this is what this means because this, you know, it's like you're not taking into account the hard work of capturing the transferring of like meaning in languages. And so I think that's another thing that I think people can get caught up in if you haven't done the work. And, you know, I've only done it for a year in Hebrew and Greek, or a year and a half, but it's like, it's tough. Like it's not for just anyone. And so, but at the same time.
Do you believe her when she says she's read multiple Bibles?
I mean, like, what's the cutoff? Is it 10? Are you an expert now? Have you read the Bible 10 times or read different Bibles? I mean,
do you think she read it from start to finish, or was like she read
a page per?
Did she mean page and then she read another Bible, a page, and it's like, oh, that's 2 Bibles technically.
I have no idea. I mean, it's really hard to quantify what it means.
Anyway, yeah. So just like, yeah, I think it's just too easy, too simple. And I think that's another problem with Tick-Tock theology. It's like simplifying something that's not meant to be that simple. And so let's move on to the next, which is hell is a metaphor. So let's.
Can I introduce this guy?
Yeah, go for it.
So apparently this person plays a character. I think he calls himself Jagazus. So I found that highly entertaining. But this is just, we're just going to look at this part 2. He has obviously 7 parts to why he thinks hell is just a metaphor. But we'll just look at part 2 for time purposes.
Hell isn't a metaphor, it's a literal place. It's mentioned in the Bible. Oh, you're using the book of Matthew. That was the word Gehenna translated from Hebrew into English. That's a literal place. Okay, so it's a literal place, just like I said. Right, Gehenna wasn't a great place. It was actually a valley in Israel where Jerusalem used it as like a dump. So they set everything on fire. Some people actually practiced child sacrifice there too, so. You're telling me the word was just actually a real place on earth? I was telling the people about it, and it was on fire.
I can see why people think he kind of looks like Jesus. Not that we know what Jesus looks like, but
very European-looking Jesus.
Yeah, the classic representation we've seen throughout.
Yeah, how dare he appropriate Jesus to be more European-looking?
I enjoyed Zephaniah's facial reaction to that one.
Well, my audio was off, but I was like, Woo.
This is another video where some things are right, but then like the conclusion is wrong. So Gehenna was a real place. It was this like dump outside of the city of Jerusalem. It was like on fire. And that's not a new thing. Like, I feel like every sermon I've heard, whenever Jesus mentions hell or Gehenna, people point this out. So Jesus is using it metaphorically. That does not mean that hell is not a place. It doesn't mean that hell itself is a metaphor. Did y'all enjoy the character?
It's clever. It's creative.
Yeah, I saw under it like hashtag Jagazus, and I was like, really? I was like, okay.
Yeah. Okay, next.
In Mark 9 and Matthew 17, Jesus tells us that the Son of Man is going to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him. This is how Jesus understands his own death, that humans will kill him. Humans are the wrathful ones. We are the ones who demand murder and death. God does not. Do you see there's this heretical idea that God is wrathful at humans and had to channel his wrath on Jesus on the cross, and that's why Jesus had to die. That is heretical because it is nowhere near how Jesus understood his death. Every time he talks about his death, it is humans who kill Jesus. Now, there is the Garden of Gethsemane where Jesus prays that this cup will pass him by. What is the cup? It's the cup of human wrath. God's cup is the cup of nonviolent love, even in the face of human wrath.
Well, I guess he also conveniently didn't read Deuteronomy. So if the other girl read multiple Bibles, he probably just read certain books, because Deuteronomy says God blesses and curses. So if he doesn't curse, then he's also a liar. So I don't know, man. It's just softball pitching out here. I'm just hitting him out, like, oh, sure. Nice sweater. I don't know.
I think it goes into the larger discussion of like atonement and like all that. But I don't know. I think my initial reaction is that his just trying to understand what he's trying to say. Like, is he saying that like humans killed Jesus? And if to say that God killed Jesus is like not fair or like not biblical or not in his character, or like I guess that's where I'm kind of like, okay.
Right. I think they're arguing that, so they're specifically arguing against the substitutionary atonement, right? They don't like that. So for God to be wrathful is heretical. So they want to present him as more loving, more caring, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So then if that's what he's trying to argue, it's like, like, yeah, if you just read the Old Testament, it's like you see the wrath of God, and
to read the New Testament.
And the New Testament. But I think a lot of examples come from the Old Testament. But even still, it's like, yeah, this idea of picking and choosing the characteristics of God or defining what's loving and what's not, and just really like picking and choosing, I think I have a problem with in this video. It's like wrath can be like something that comes from love too, right? It's not like they're opposites. They can complement each other and like things like that. But I guess that's my initial reaction.
He's cherry picking not only God's attributes, but also biblical text. Because even in that text he mentioned from the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus prays to God, "May this cup pass from me," and he's saying, no, that's just a cup of human wrath, not God's wrath. But if you just keep reading to the next verse, Jesus says, "But not as I will, but as you will," to God. Okay, so he understands this as being God's will. And I agree, human beings killed Jesus. Now, the Bible affirms that. But if you read like the Book of Acts, both of those things are affirmed, that human beings killed Jesus, but it was also planned by God for the purposes of the atonement and for the salvation of everybody.
Let's move on to the last one then.
When Pilate says, "What is truth?" earlier in John, Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." That verse has been weaponized by many Christians in order to say, you must believe in Jesus in this certain way. Jesus would never weaponize like that. When Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and life," what is he saying? He's saying that the way, the truth, and the life is nonviolent love working in the world for justice for everyone. Nonviolent love that refuses to enter into the world with guns ablazing, but it instead works for more love and compassion in the world. That is why Jesus is our anti-fascist king.
Okay, I don't even know what's going on. There's some things I must be missing. Christ, all right. This is part 6. Christ or
It's part of a series, Christ or Anti-Fascist King. I don't know what he means by anti-fascist. I'm guessing he means everyone who disagrees with him is a fascist.
Yeah, but why? Christ or anti-fascist king? Interesting. Okay, so it's interesting that he's claiming that people are weaponizing this verse. So again, I don't know the context of it, so I don't want to say something out of pocket, but it's interesting how he's reading all this love and compassion into the statement. So if you're going to argue that people are weaponizing it, then he's also similarly taking away the truth and the weight of the passage itself. So yeah, I don't know. Do you see, is love written in here? Maybe I'm reading it too literally, so I don't know.
I think he means weaponizing, if I understood him correctly, as
like forcing people to believe Jesus.
Yeah, like Jesus is the only way to salvation. Right? He thinks that's weaponizing this verse. Any initial reactions, Angela?
I think in the same way, I'm like, huh? Like, again, it's the same guy from before. I think I have a harder time following him. But I think generally it's like, it's not, I don't know, it's only weaponizing if you don't believe in like the statement, right? Like, if you believe that the statement is true, that Jesus is the way, the truth, and life, then like to tell people it would be the opposite of weaponizing, but it would be freeing and it would be life-giving. And so I think it's just like a certain perspective he's coming in with. And yeah, again, maybe there's a greater context to what he exactly means. Like, is he talking about people who used it to colonize or what? Like, I don't know what he's trying to say, but I think from this video alone, like, to say that this verse is a weapon or like aggressive and not loving, I don't know. It's like very interesting perspective. And I think it embodies like in general, like the message or like the perspective that progressive Christians come in with.
Yeah, and this is another instance of him just ripping the saying of Jesus straight out of context. So it's from John chapter 14, and Jesus is saying that he is the only way to the Father. It's exactly what he's saying. You know, he not only goes in verse 6 when he says, no one comes to the Father except through me, he goes on to say, like, if you really know me, you will know my Father as well. And that's his whole point. He's telling people, like, you cannot know God unless you know me. So it's not saying I am the only way to social justice or whatever this pastor was trying to make him say. So it's just kind of shocking that he will just do this guy, because it's one thing to misunderstand the Bible when like you don't understand the nuances of the original languages, you don't understand genre. This is just like, just keep reading. The same with the last video. Just keep reading in the same passage and it will tell you.
It's also interesting to assume that if Christ is our anti-fascist king, did he even know what fascism was back then? I mean, was it prevalent? I thought it was a much later development, but
yeah, it's a 20th century kind of attitude. Yeah.
I digress.
Yeah, I think overall, like, do you guys have any like thoughts on Tick-Tock theology and just kind of what we saw?
I understand in our culture, like, we have short attention spans, and I'm not saying TikTok is necessarily bad. I don't use it personally. Maybe one day I will. I have no idea. I don't care about dance videos. But it can make you feel like you're enlightened or smart because you listen to a 30-second clip and you're like, oh, no one knows that. No one is. And chances are it's very low level. It's either very old stuff or very wrong stuff. And you're not going to be really taken seriously in any sort of high level discussion, theology or otherwise, if you're relying on TikTok. I've even had people try to send me TikTok videos. Oh, watch this, you know. Ooh, this was so lit. And I'm just like, really? Like, you're sending me TikTok videos as like I'm supposed to take this seriously? And so I just want to caution people, and not just TikTok, even short YouTube or Instagram clips or memes. Like, memes can be funny. Very rarely do they have any good argument in them. They just for fun. So don't be lazy. Read things more carefully. Do more research and study, and it'll make you a wiser person. Even if, you won't be able to confidently say like these people and pretend that you know more than you do.
I would say definitely social media provides you a platform to reach people. So I think Christians shouldn't sleep on it, but at the same time, because you can be driven to make the content, it can consume you. So I think there definitely has to be a balance. We definitely need to be on it because we need to inform people as well, right? But we shouldn't be on it to counter everyone. Oh, this guy said this, well, I'll make a video about this. So not to say that it's wrong per se. Sometimes you do need those kind of reaction videos, but I would say mostly like know your reason in being on social media. You're not going to change anyone's perspective if you're combative or polemic, or if you're going to force the issue. But if you're able to just reach people on it, I think that's the benefit that we can offer.
Yeah, and again, like, theology takes time. Like, it takes work, especially in our context. And TikTok theology, I think, is like a shortcut to that. And I think that's why it draws so many people, is because they get like the facts, quote unquote, straight, very simply, very in a short way, where it's digestible. And like Isaac was saying, it's like new. And so it can attract so many people, but it's like, yeah, like, I don't want to say like good things take time to develop. And I think theology is one of those things. Like, to say that you figured it out all in a minute video on TikTok is silly, you know? And like, it might act as like a doorway. And that's what we hope, even with these podcasts, is like to whet your appetite for more, to go deeper on your own, and like to study on your own, and to challenge you guys to really be literate with the Bible and good students of who God is and who Jesus is, and not to just pick and choose. And so I think that's like what I would say is like, take time to study on your own, like what the Bible says, and not to look to these like sound bites or these clips that are so short. And like, yeah, it's not even a discussion in the high level world of this. So yeah, I think that's all I have to really say. Yeah, if there aren't any other thoughts, I think that was a solid reaction video to TikTok theology.
Yeah, we'll do it again if, you know, there are other videos that we can find that are worth talking about.
Yeah, and if you guys have a specific video where you're like, wait, I think this one is like pretty solid, like, please send it to us. We would love this reaction video. I think it was fun. I really liked it.
It was fun.
But again, like, do your own research. Like, please go further on something that was confusing, or even ask us some things we can refer you to. But I really enjoyed this. And yeah, again, be cautious when it comes to TikTok theology. Like, just the platform in itself is meant for shorter videos, hot takes, like what is it called, like clickbaity titles and topics. So be careful, move with caution, but also move deeper into the things that we know and hear. And so with that, we thank you so much for listening to the Inner Christianity podcast, or even if you're watching on YouTube, welcome and thank you so much. Let us know anything on the comments or in our DMs or email. Thank you so much. Have a good one.